In this podcast, in our series with Dr. Rob Martens, we discuss why 3D printing is considered to be a disruptive technology. Rob, I understand that you've got a significant interest in 3D printing. Would you like to discuss a little bit further what's brought you to identifying 3D printing as such a disruptor for procurement and supply chain going forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a great question. Why is 3D printing regarded as being so disruptive? I took an interest when I was based in China as a procurement director for an oil and gas company, and I had a chat with a partner of a consultancy firm, and he asked me what my company was doing with 3D printing, and I said, nothing. We don't produce anything, and why would I care? Printing plastic puppets or soldiers or something, that's not of interest at all. And he said, you don't understand. This is part of Industry 4.0. 3D printing, or additive manufacturing as it is officially called, has a huge impact, or will have a huge impact on supply chains. And you, as a procurement and supply chain director, you should care. So I didn't really know a lot about it. So I started reading a report and reading a bit more literature, and then I got grabbed by it, and I thought, this is a major thing. This is something that we don't come across very often. So disruptive, but also offering so much opportunities for better sustainability and social change.
Okay, so you really think that procurement teams should be sitting up and listening to the changes that are being brought about by this technology, and why do you think procurement teams should care about 3D printing?
You know, so far this 3D printing has always been the area of the techies. All the technical people were looking, oh, this is a new machine, what can I do with it? And it hasn't really become a topic for discussion among supply chain professionals. But now more and more, and also after my own doctoral study, I realized that this technology can be used in ways like the internet has been used. The internet itself was just a tool to connect companies so you could send messages, but it has enabled Apple with their iTunes and downloading music and playing music on your iPhone. It has created the rise of the biggest companies in the world that didn't exist 20 years ago. So the technology enables new business models and enables new supply chains, and that's why we as procurement professionals and supply chain professionals should care about it.
So what you're saying to us, Rob, in essence, is that you can possibly compare the potential impact of 3D printing and the changes that it could bring about to market competitiveness could be so impactful that it could be similar to the rise of the internet and how we had to adopt that into our working environment a few decades ago.
Absolutely, because it enables to overcome certain hurdles that we don't even realize they're hurdles because we're just used to the way things are. But with 3D printing, a couple of things are extremely interesting. You have freedom of design. So you can produce anything that you can design. Today, we design things in a way that is limited because we know we have to make it in a certain way. We have to weld it, or we have to use a sand casting, or we have to do assembly because we can't make it out of one piece. And that's kind of, common knowledge, and this is how we design things. With 3D printing, that limitation is gone. What you can design, you can print in one go and in one piece. Now, just think about that. So, assembly activities will reduce. You can reduce the amount of materials. So raw material usage is much less. Means you don't need a lot of support, you don't need strengtheners, so you can produce lighter, which is good for the environment, good for transportation, and you don't have waste. You only use what you need. So in regards of sustainability aspects, this is fantastic. Now there's another very remarkable thing. 20, 30 years ago, let's say 30 years ago, in our Western world, we produced a lot. We had heavy industry, we had shipbuilding, and we had machine shops, and a lot of that. Most of these activities have moved to low-cost countries. Only for one reason, not because the material is cheaper there, it's because labor is cheaper. Now, if I tell you that with 3D printing, or as I said, additive manufacturing, the labor factor is insignificant, then you can wonder if there's still a ground to actually go to China or to Vietnam or Mexico to produce your products if you can produce them at the same cost just around the corner, or maybe in your own factory. Think of the impact of that on our supply chains.
It's quite significant, isn't it, when you put it in that perspective? And the fact that some of our supply chains for many organisations, especially in the manufacturing sector, can be quite lengthy, and you're dealing with very many suppliers. So what you're posing is that with the rise of this technology, there's a potential for insourcing for organisations, or for them to have greater control of the components that they're actually outputting to use directly on their production line.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're proposing to us?
Yes, it is, and it's actually twofold. So there have been some studies that indicate that because labor is no longer a significant factor in the production cost, reshoring will occur. So bringing, instead of the contrary of offshoring is reshoring, so bringing production back. Now, would that be necessarily to your own company, or maybe to a hub in the area? You know, there's different possibilities, but that's one big step. The other thing is that the expectation is that we will see prosumers producing consumers, people who will produce their own things. And let's not necessarily always look at, you know, our own circumstances. You know, in our world, if we need something, there's always a Tesco's or some do-it-yourself shop around the corner. You need a part, you can just go anywhere and get it. But there are massive amounts of people on this earth living in areas where you don't have those kind of shops, and you still need a part. So those people will also be producing, is the expectation, is producing their own products. So you see prosumers coming up, you see reshoring, and you'll see something that hasn't happened yet, is mass customization, which is a bit, you know, sounds like a bit of a contradiction, mass production or customization, but with 3D printing, people all talk about mass customization. With other words, you can customize and produce it still massively, because the cost of one unique product versus another unique product is just 2 times the same cost. Typically, in our current production process, you need volume to reduce the unit price, but the unit price for 1 piece or 10 pieces is the same with 3D printing. So if I print one unique product and the other one on a unique product, they'll cost the same price. Only if I use more material, it might be a bit more expensive. So as soon as consumers start realizing that they can order their tailor-made glasses, the spectacles, or their tailor-made dashboard, or even shoes, which is already happening. Nike is already, and Adidas are already 3D printing shoes which are exactly made to your size. You know, consumers haven't really figured that out yet, but as soon as that's going to happen, they will want it.
It's quite unbelievable when you put it in that perspective, that the consumer has a greater ability to define what they're actually going to be purchasing from your organisation. And I'm thinking from what you're saying at the moment, Rob, that there's going to be a significant impact on inventory and how organisations do or don't hold significant volumes of stock holding anymore. Do you think 3D printing is going to disrupt warehousing and stock holding as well?
I am convinced. Although I should clarify this, 3D printing will not displace mass production. If you need 10,000 or 1 million of the same pieces, there's no way you're going to 3D print them. That's not cost effective. So it's not going to completely replace our traditional manufacturing, but it will take a big chunk out of it. There are a lot of companies that have parts in their warehouses that don't move. Plastic parts, metal parts. 3D printing can solve that problem, because unless if you need them within 2 hours, all out of the blue, typically if you have a couple of days, you could probably print it. So why would you need to keep all those parts on stock if you can just produce them on request or on demand, which, you know, on-demand fabrication is much more cost effective than having all these products in your warehouse. That's one. But there's another thing we haven't talked about, why 3D printing is going to help overcome supply chain problems. It's two other factors. One is time, and the other one is distance or remoteness, if you will. Now, time sounds a bit odd, because 3D printing is slower than traditional manufacturing. It still is. It's getting faster every year, but it's still slower. However, There are certain manufacturing processes that are, if you only need one or two, that are slow. If I go to a sand casting, to a foundry in China or in India, and I see that I need the sand casting for this valve body, and I need this valve in my project, I would be waiting 6 months, and maybe another 2 months for manufacturing and delivery. I could have it in 2 weeks with 3D printing. It might be a bit more expensive, but I can save the schedule of my project. So that's one. So for sudden requirements, very urgent requirements that you need one or two of, you can 3D printing, you can use that to solve your scheduling problems. The other one I call it remoteness. So if you think of difficult to reach locations like ships, offshore platforms, maybe oil pumping units somewhere in the Canadian oil sands, for example, or we've seen the Bahamas, the big disaster that happened, where emergency response is happening. Those people need parts. If you have machines there, the only thing you need is raw material, which is just a bit of powder for metal or some plastic filament, and you need a design. And you can produce your own parts instead of having to wait till it's shipped from the other side of the globe. That is another supply chain problem that is difficult to fix, where 3D printing can be an enormous effective solution.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much for this overview, Dr. Rob Martens. It's been great speaking to you today. It sounds like 3D printing going forward really is going to be a disruptor in our workspace. And it's something that we should really talk at greater length, because it looks like it's going to be a solution provider, and that's really what procurement is all about at the end of the day, finding the right solutions for our organisations. So I'm going to say thank you for our podcast today, and ask our members to keep an eye out for the future podcasts that we'll be recording, so we can go into a little bit more deeper information and capture some more insight into 3D printing and how it's going to be disrupting our world. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure.